To operate effectively in the trading environment, we need rules and boundaries to guide our behavior. It is a simple fact of trading that the potential exists to do no enormous damage to ourselves, damage that can be way out of proportion to what we may think is possible. There are many kinds of trades in which the risk of loss is unlimited. To prevent the possibility of exposing ourselves to damage, we need to create an internal structure in the form of specialized mental discipline and a perspective that guards our behavior so that we always act in our own best interest. This structure has to exist within each of us because unless society, the market doesn't provide it. The market provides structure in the form of behavior pattern that indicate when an opportunity to buy or sell exists. But that's where the structure ends with a simple indication. Otherwise, from each individual perspective, there are no formalized rules to guide their behavior. Aren't even any beginnings, middle, or ending as there are in virtually every other activity we participate in. This is an extremely important distinction with profound psychological implication. The market is like a stream that is in constant motion. It doesn't start, stop, or wait. Even when the market are closed, prices are still in motion. There is no rule that the opening price on any day must be the same as the closing price the day before. Nothing we do in society appropriately to function if it in such a boundaryless environment. Even gambling games have built-in structures that make them most different from trading and a lot less dangerous. For example, if we decide to play blackjack, the first thing we have to do is decide how much we are going to swing our risks. This is a choice we are forced to make by the rules of the game. If we don't make the choice, we don't get to play. In trading, no one as a is going to force you to decide in advance what your risk is. In fact, what we have is a limitless environment where possibly anything can happen at any moment, and only the constant winners define their risks in advance of putting on or trade. For everyone else, defining the risks in advance will force you to confront the reality that each trade has a probable outcome, meaning that it could be a loser. Constant loser do almost anything to avoid accepting the reality that no matter how good a trade looks, it could lose. Without the presence of an external structure forcing the typical trader to think otherwise, he is susceptible to any number of justification, rationalization, and the kind of distorted logic that will allow him to get into trade believing that he can lose, which makes determining the risk in advance irrelevant. All gambling games have specified beginnings, middles, and ending based on a sequence of events that determine the outcome of the game. Once you decide you are going to participate, you can change your mind. You are in for the duration. That's not true for trading. In trading, prices are in constant motion. Nothing begins until you decide it should. It lasts as long as you want, and it doesn't end until you want it to be over. Regardless of what you may have planned or wanted to do, any number of psychological factors can come into play, causing you to become distracted, change your mind, become scared or overconfident. In other words, causing you to behave in the ways that are erratic and unintended. Because gambling games have a formal ending, they force the participant to be an active loser. If you are on losing streak, you can keep on losing without making a conscious decision to do so. The end of each game was the beginning of a new game, and you have to actively subject more of your asset to further risks by reaching into the wallet or pushing some chips into the center of the table. Trading has no formal ending. The market will not take you out of a trade unless you have the appropriate mental structure to end the trade in a manner that is always in the best interest. You have become a passive loser. This means that once you are in a losing trade, you don't have to do anything to keep on losing. You don't even have to watch. You can just ignore the situation and the market will take everything you want and more. One of the many contradictions of trading is that it offers a gift and a cost at the same time. The gift is that perhaps for the most time in our lives we are in complete control of everything we do. The cost is that there are no external rules or boundaries to guide or structure our behavior. The unlimited characteristic of the trading environment require that we act with some degree of restraint and self-control. At least we want to create some measure of constant success. The structure we need to guide our behavior has to originate in the mind as a conscious act of free will. This is where the many problems begin. The unwillingness to create rule. I have not yet encountered a person interested in trading who didn't resist the notion of creating a set of rules. The resistance isn't always overt. Quite the contrary, it is usually very subtle. We agree on the one hand that rules make sense, but we really have no intention of doing whatever is being suggested. This resistance can be intense and it has a logical source. Most of the structure in our mind was given to us as a result of our social upbringing and based on choice made by other people. In other words, it was installed in our mind, but we didn't originate in our mind. It is this a very important distinction in the process of installing structure. Many of us naturally was to move, express, and learn, or the nature of our existence through our own direct experience were denied. Many of these denied impulses were never reconciled and still exist inside of us as frustration, anger, disappointment, guilt, or even hatred. The accumulation of this negative feeling acts as a force inside our mental environment, causing us to resist anything that denies us the freedom to do and be whatever we want, what we want. In other words, the very reason we are attacked to trading in the first place, the unlimited freedom of creative expression, is the same reason we feel a natural resistance to creating the kind of rules and boundaries that can appropriately guide our behavior. It is as if we have found a utopia in which there is a complete freedom, and then someone taps us on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you have to create rules, and not only that, you also have to have the discipline to abide by them." The need for rules may The need of rules may make perfect sense, but it can be difficult to generate the motivation to create these rules when we have been trying to break free of them most of our lives. It usually takes a great deal of pain and suffering to break down the source of our resistance to establishing and abiding by a training regime that is organized, consistent, and reflect prudent money management guidelines. Now, I am not implying that we have to reconcile all our past frustration and disappointment to become a successful trader, because that's not the case, and you certainly don't have to suffer. I have worked with many traders who have achieved their objective of consistency and haven't done anything to reconcile the backlog of denied impulse. However, I am implying that you can take for granted how much effort and focus you may have to put into building the kind of mental structure that compensate for the negative effort denied impulse can have your ability to establish the skill that will assure you success trader. And you certainly don't have to suffer. I have worked with mentor who have achieved their objective of consistency and haven't done anything to reconcile the backlog of internal. I am implying that you can take for granted how much effort and focus you may have to put into building the kind of mental structure that compensates for the negative effort denied impulse can have on your ability to establish the skills that will assure you success as a trader. Problem failure to make responsibility. Take responsibility. Trading can be characterized as a pure, unencumbered personal choice with an immediate outcome. Remember, nothing happens until we decide to start. It lasts as long as we want, and it doesn't end until we decide to stop. All of this beginning, middle, and ending are the result of our interpretation of the information available and how we choose to act on our interpretation. Now we may want the freedom to make choice, but that doesn't mean we are ready and willing to accept the responsibility for the outcome. Traders who are not ready to accept responsibility for the outcome for the interpretation and action will find themselves in a dilemma. How does one participate in an activity that allows complete freedom of choice and at the same time ever taking responsibility if the outcome of one's choice are unexpected and not to one's liking? The hard reality. The hard reality of trading is that if you want to create consistency, you have to start from the premise that no matter what the outcome, you are completely responsible. There is a rebel or responsibility few people. The way to avoid responsibility is to adapt a trading style that is to all intent and purpose random. And we have random trading as poorly planned trades or trades that are not planned at all. It is an unorganized approach that takes into consideration an unlimited set of market variables which do not allow you to find out what works on constant biases and what does not. Randomness is unstructured freedom without responsibility. When we trade without well-defined plan and with the unlimited set of variable, it's very easy to take credit for the trades that turn out to our liking because there were some method present. At the same time, it is very easy to ever take responsibility for the trade that didn't turn out the way we wanted because there are always some variable we didn't know before the know about and therefore cannot take into consideration beforehand. If the market behavior were truly random, then it will be difficult, if not impossible, to create consistency. If it is impossible to be consistent, then we really don't want to take responsibility. The problem with this logic is that our direct explanation of the market tells us something different. The same behavior pattern presents themselves over and over again. Even though the outcome of each individual pattern is random, the outcome of series of patterns is consistent. This is a paradox, but one that is easily resolved with a disciplined, organized, and consistent approach. I have worked with countless traders who could spend hours doing market analysis and planning trades for the next day. Then instead of putting on trades, they planned that there is something else. The trades they put on were usually ideas from friends or tips from brokers. I probably don't have to tell you that. And the trades they originally planned but didn't act on were usually the big winners of the day. This is a classic example of how we become susceptible to unstructured random trading because we want to avoid responsibility. When we act on our own ideas, we put our creative abilities on the line and we get instant feedback on how well our ideas worked. It is very difficult to rationalize away any unsatisfactory result. On the other hand, when we enter an unplanned random trade, it is much easier to shift the responsibility by blaming the friend or the broker for the bad ideas. There is something else about the nature of trading that makes it easy to accept the responsibility that comes with creating structure in favor of trading randomly. It is the fact that any trade has the potential to be a winner, even a big winner. That big winning trade can come your way, whether you are a great analyst or a lousy one, whether you are do or don't take responsibility. It takes effort to create the kind of disciplined approach that is necessary to become a constant winner. But as you can see, it is very easy to avoid this kind of mental work in favor of trading with an undisciplined random approach. Addiction to random reward. Several studies have been done on a psychology effect of random reward on monkey. For example, if it is a monkey to do a task and constantly rewarded every time the task is done, the monkey quickly learns to associate a specific outcome with the effort. External versus internal control. Our upbringing has programmed us to function in a social environment, which means we have acquired certain thinking strategies for fulfilling our needs, wants, and desires that are geared towards social interaction. Not only have we learned to depend on each other to fulfill that needs, wants, and desires, we cannot fulfill completely on our own, but in process we have become many socially based control manipulating technique for assuring that other people behave in a manner that is consistent with what we want. The market may seem like social endeavor because there are so many people involved, but they are not. If into the modern society, we have learned to depend on each other to fulfill basic needs in the basic market. Even can be created by psychology who is truly avid man or woman for himself or herself. Not only can we not depend on the market to do anything for us, but it's impossible to manipulate or counter anything that the market does. Now, if we depend fulfill our needs, wants, and desires by learning how to control and manipulate our environment, but suddenly we find ourselves created in an environment that doesn't know, care, or respond to anything that's important to us. Or does just leave us, you are right, if you said of the proverb, creep without a parallel. One of the principal reasons so many successful people have failed miserably at trading is that the success party attribute to the superiority to manipulate the control and social environment to respond to what they want. To some degree, all of us have learned or developed technique to make the external environment conform to our mental environment. The problem is that none of this technique work with the market. The market doesn't respond to control and manipulation. However, we can control our perception and interpretation of market information as well as our own behavior instead of controlling our surroundings so they conform to the idea of who we think will be. We can learn to control ourselves, then we can perceive information from the most objective perspective possible and structure our mental environment so that we always behave in a manner that is in our best, in our own best interest. Taking responsibility. As the word taking responsibility sounds simple, the concept is neither easy to grasp nor easy to put into practice in our trading. Into random reward, we will not take responsibility, one straight was. The decision is always what quiet the contrast will be subtle. The one name that makes rules make sense, what we really have no intention of doing whatever is being suggested. Some intention that logical source. Some mind us want to assess results, so upbringing based on social choice made by other people. It was instilled in our mind, but we did not originate in our minds. It's a very important distinction in the process of instilling structure. Many of our natural impulse to move, express, and learn how the nature of our experience through our own direct experience were denied. Most of these negative impulses were never reconciled and still exist inside of us as frustration, anger, disappointment, guilt, or even hatred. The accumulation of this negative feeling acts as force inside our mental environment, causing us to resist that denies the freedom to do and whatever we want and what we want. In other words, the very reason we are attracted to trading in the first place, the unlimited freedom of creative expression, is the same reason we feel natural resistance to getting the kind of rules around it. And approving Adabi where it is as if we have found a utopia in which there is complete freedom and then someone taps on the shoulder and say "Hey, you have to get rules and not by the we also we have to distinctly abide by them. Important body can be difficult to generate the motivation to create these rules when we've been trained to break free of the most of our lives. Take a great deal of pain and suffering to break down the source of resistance and restlessness and we at present regions that organize consistent product money management guidelines. With that case, I have a very framework of money management. Good framework for money management. Chapter 4.